Dr. Stephanie Carlson at the University of Minnesota did some fun research that was called the Batman effect. And it was about when kids are pretending to be a character they admire, they kind of level up their skill set. Hi, Claire. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too, Rachel. We are together for another episode of Teach, Play, Love. Today's topic is something really fun. We're going to talk about play. We love to talk about play, but today we're going to talk about a very specific type of play, pretend play or imaginary play. Mm-hmm. So just to give our listeners a heads up on what today's episode is going to consist of, we're going to talk about what pretend and imaginary play looks like in the first 5-ish years of child development. Then we're going to talk about why pretend play is so important for healthy child development. And then we're going to wrap up with some hot tips for how to encourage pretend play at home. But first, I thought it would be kind of fun if I asked you what kind of pretend play you liked when you were little. What was your favorite imaginary game, Rachel?
Actually, I was very good at pretend play because I went all the way into having a very well thought out imaginary friend. And she had a name and a last name. Her name was Sally Munder. And I was young, so I don't remember a lot of it, but I've been told a lot of stories about Sally. I do have a vague recollection, although I know memories get muddled up over time, but I have a vague recollection of standing on a stool to reach the phone to call her. So I think some of that was going on, but I know my mom has told me many times that she had to set a place at dinner for Sally. Sally got to come over to play a lot. So it was a very sophisticated little friend I had there. So, And I, paid attention to the research on imaginary friends and pretend play, just knowing that I have this in my history. And so it's kind of fun to have had that and learn about what that means. And but yeah, so I love playing imaginary play. I get into whenever I go visit centers, I'm right in there with those kids getting whatever they're doing. I join right in.
Well, we're going to talk a lot today about what that says about you as a young child, that you were so invested in your imaginary friend and that deep imaginary play. I'm the middle child of 3 kids, and my older brother is 4 years older. So I had a lot of really rich pretend play in my household growing up because he was able to kind of scaffold and facilitate some really intense pretend play for us. Having an older sibling does that sometimes. So we did. We went to I grew up in Pennsylvania. And one summer we went to the Philadelphia Zoo, and this made a huge impression on my brothers and I. And so I want to say it was a long-standing, like maybe years worth of recurring zoo play. In our basement, we had stuffed animals. We had cardboard boxes that were like the areas for the animals. And we set up all these someone would be the zookeeper and someone would be the visitor at the zoo. And when my younger brother was a little baby and he was even still just in his little bouncy chair, he would be one of the animals at the zoo because he was too young to play pretend with us. So I just decided
that makes sense for the third child, right? They get to be the animal in the zoo.
Yeah, poor kid. But I just, it really made an impression on me. I must have been 4 or 5 years old. Mm-hmm. And my older brother was, 8 or 9 years old. And we just had a lot of plots and a lot of fantastical things that happened at the zoo and settings and characters. And I just love thinking about that now that I understand the other side of the coin, like what was going on with our development at that point in our lives, that was so important to us.
I love that you use that term plot, because I think that a lot of times adults look at imaginary play as frivolous or extra, or there's not a ton of developmental value there, but just even using that terminology, I hope wakes everybody up and thinks like, oh yeah, it is so sophisticated. You're planning, you're adapting to each other. I know we're going to get into all of this, but you can just hear it in that scenario you were talking about. And I'm also laughing as a parent thinking about the other side of that. When you're at first, you're like, great, oh my gosh, this turned into such a magical experience for my kids. And then about the 15th time, they're like, can you play zookeeper or get us food for the zoo? You're like, oh, why did we get down this path? Yeah. But kids are okay with it. Kids want to keep going. And they have a lot of control and they love doing something that they feel like they can direct it. So it's so good for kids. And I love that example you just shared.
Yeah, we'll talk about this later too, but like hat tip to my parents, we were in the basement, which was not really a finished basement, but they let us set it up and leave it there so we could return to the
Yes.
play. And that's
Such an
so
important part of
important.
play. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like we weren't done yet, but it was time to go have a bath or it was time to go have dinner and we had to just leave
Yeah.
it. But they found a space in the house where we could do that without being too disruptive to the rest of the household.
Oh, we could do a whole tangent on how important that is, right? It was
Yeah.
this is not regardless of pretend play, whatever play is going on, if children are deep into it, find a way not to have to clean it up every time because you come back to where you left off versus starting over. And for pretend play, bringing myself back, that is a very important part of pretend play is to let it get more complex and sophisticated and to let children go where they want to go. It's just, and then as an adult, it's fascinating to watch if you're mindful of the richness of development and learning and social skills that are happening in that play.
Yeah. So let's back up to infants and toddlers. If you don't dive into child development the way that Rachel and I do every day for our jobs and also just for fun sometimes, you'll see Rachel and I are always swapping messages off hours about things that are going on. You almost might miss it when it starts to develop. It's so subtle, but what we see is like late in that second year of life. So you've got a 1-year-old, maybe like an 18-month-old, a 24-month-old. You'll start to see the beginning of symbolic thought, which is a very complex cognitive milestone. And it's not like, I always talk about those blockbuster milestones, like taking your first step and saying your first word. But the first time your 1-year-old picks up an object like a banana and pretends to make a phone call, that's a huge milestone cognitively. It means that your child's getting ready for pretend play.
Yeah. And when they're toddlers, infants aren't doing this as much, but when they get into that toddler phase, it is because their brain is developing. Babies, when they're born, they still have a ton of development to do, both physically obvious, that's an obvious one, but cognitively too. And one of the things is it's not just the quantity of brain development that's happening, it's also the sophistication that's happening. So as they grow, they start to be able to do things like that symbolic play. And at first, it's often more common to have it be things like they're playing with a baby doll or they're using a stuffed animal to represent kind of what it's representing, but they are using an inanimate object to represent as if it was real. And they understand-ish mostly that it's different, but they know the behavior. So you might see a toddler taking care of maybe there's a little stuffed animal dog and treating it like a dog or trying to feed it or put its face in a bottle of, or a bucket of water or something, which is super fun for families. But things like that. So they're a little bit more representational. And that's what we'd call that representational toys also. So if you have a toy car, it's going to be a car. If you have a baby doll, it's going to be a baby. Children don't do a ton of the symbolic play with those materials. They do some. Especially if it looks like something else, like that banana example you gave. Although that's a little old school, right? That's you and I when we were holding up a phone. Now they're picking up like a block and now to pretend it's a cell phone, right?
Yeah, right. I dated myself with that one.
But that's okay. And now actually I was doing some pretend play with Leah, this little girl that's in my life, and she asked me if I wanted to use my watch to Apple Pay or my Fitbit, and I was like, oh, the world is changing on me. But then she said, why are you laughing at me? And I said, you're right. That is how you pay. I get it. You're right. I'm sorry. It was just so shocking to me that we had moved on to that I got to Apple Pay at my pretend pizza restaurant. Yeah. But then they get deep into this symbolic play, and that you see it emerging, as you were saying, in that kind of, as they're getting into that 2-year-old phase. And then when they get into 3, they are on that symbolic play is hardcore. And so one of the things you want to be thinking about, we're kind of leading into this, is the type of materials you have. We talk a ton about loose parts or unscripted materials. And there's some great resources on that, but things that it's a wooden block can be 1,000 things. A car is going to be a car for the most part. So making sure that you have those materials, because kids will just go. So again, I know I mentioned this already, but I'm in classrooms a lot because I go visit our centers. And usually when I'm in that preschool, pre-K room, there is some rich dramatic play happening. Something's going on in that part of the classroom. Sometimes it's pretty typical, like a restaurant or going to someone's house. I often go see if I can order anything. What's on the menu? Can I come over for dinner? Sometimes I am told flatly, no. But often I'm offered an array of items that I need to pretend to eat and see what the chef's got going on. Yeah. But sometimes it's a shoe store. Sometimes it's a zoo. Sometimes it's a pet hospital. Sometimes it's a hairdresser. It is what children want it to be, and they can act out pretty sophisticated experiences. And the teachers often bring in representational toys. So if it's a shoe store, they're probably asking families to bring in a lot of shoes to use in that shoe store, right? And boxes. But then, then they're using cardboard boxes are the best, right? They can be anything you want them to be. And then kids collect things in the room and they turn it into the shoe store and the things that they have seen when they go to DSW or whatever shoe store they go to. Those are the ones that's how they recreate that scene for themselves. And then they operate within that. So it is pretty exciting to watch it. Once you know what's going on and you can see that sophistication, it gets exciting. And then I know maybe you want to talk about this a little bit, just the what happens with kind of that pre-K age when they start to get more sophisticated in their social experiences within the play.
It becomes like a real vehicle, and there's like it just becomes so much more complex. If you think about the 2-year-old who's just picking up a wooden block and pretending to type a text on it, that's imaginary play. But fast forward to that 3, 4, like you said, like that 4-year-old year, now they're imagining objects that don't even exist. They might sip from an imaginary teacup. So there's no physical object that is the cup. They are fully now, their brains are so big and bursting, they're able to pretend that there's an invisible object that they're doing something with. Yeah. And then as they get into that pre-K year, that 4-year-old year, 5-year-old year, now they're really starting to lean into the social emotional development part of pretend play, which is that collaboration, communication. Like I mentioned, my older brother was 8 and I was 4. And so he really, let's be honest, a lot of the plot ideas were his because he was a lot older than I was, but he was teaching me how to you. And we also had another game called You Be Something, I Be Something, which is where he wanted to play superheroes, but I wanted to play house. And so we would play a game where the superhero came to the house and stole the baby and it was like a whole plot, but like, how much, like such rich social emotional development happening there because I was learning about dialogue. I was learning about do we have rules about our pretend play? Right. Like, are there guidelines? Are we following some like parameters? These are all skills that we want our kids to have, like long term, right? That's the kind of kid in a first grade classroom that's going to be able to walk up to another child and say like, do you want to pretend that we're superheroes at recess, right? And I'm going to fly and you're going to be invisible and we're going to have a whole rich experience together. It's just so much happening there.
Yeah. And that back and forth social piece that you're talking about is just so interesting to me. That's the part I love the most about it, is to watch children learn how to do things like communicate their thoughts and feelings and negotiate and have 2 separate ideas and figure out how to bring those together. I mean, you made up a game. That's another thing as you get older, as kids get older, and temperament comes in this too, but people start to go, well, what are the rules? Because we start to spend a lot of time within rules someone else makes for us. But when you're in this pretend play, you're willing to say, yeah, we can make up whatever thing we want to do. But there's always some construct that the kids are working within, and they're sometimes it's spoken, sometimes it's unspoken. Sometimes the child challenges it. Like you as a 4-year-old younger sister probably challenged a whole bunch of things that your 8-year-old brother had in mind. And he had to figure out how to be flexible or reel you back if he was willing to give up some of his control or share it with you. It's just all those things you can immediately, as we're talking about this, you can probably see how you use these, listeners, at work or in relationships. These are all really important life skill, and they are just so valuable. And this is where they practice them. We should probably talk about that sometimes this pretend play and sometimes the games feel a little edgy for families, for parents. And just to keep in mind that this is where children test ideas out. This is where they practice real life. This is one of the reasons kids want to play things like home living, we often refer to it, or restaurant. It's something that they go to all the time. They want to try on these roles. They want to see how it feels. They know that adults have a lot of information and skills and experience they don't have, and they want to try to be one of them. And so in tough situations, or if they're hearing about something in the news or something else, or seeing it on a movie, they will play things. So superhero can get really aggressive, intensive. A lot of superheroes have weapons, and children will want to play those things. They don't have the adult understanding of all the terrible consequences of those things. Right. They are just experimenting with it. So you can put some constructs on it as an adult too. You can put some parameters on it, but just know there's nothing wrong with me calling Sally Munder all the time. And there's nothing wrong with children playing, having some sort of play that can feel a little stressful. It is all under this guise of pretend play, of just kind of learning about how the world works, trying things on, getting some control, experimenting with the symbolic play, learning the difference between fantasy and reality. It's all baked in there, and it's all good stuff.
Testing things out. Yeah, that's what so much of play is. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will talk more about pretend play.
Did you know that you can get the Teach, Play, Love brand of learning for your preschooler every day? The very people you trust for parenting advice are behind our Bright Horizons preschool program. Learning adventures that inspire kids to reach their unique potential. One-of-a-kind preschool for your one-of-a-kind kid. That's Bright Horizons. Enrollment is happening now. Visit brighthorizons.com to find a center near you.
Okay, we are back, and we're going to pick up our conversation on imaginary play, kind of where we left off. I want to make sure that we do justice to all the things that your child is learning and benefiting from when they engage in imaginary play. So you talked about a little bit already, Rachel. We talked about social emotional learning that's happening, collaboration, learning how to take turns. What are the rules of the play? These are all skills they're going to need in elementary school, college, their future career. What are some other things that are going on with kids?
Well, let's talk about that rules one just a little bit more, because no one really tells you the rules of social situations as an adult. You just know them, right? In most cases. So sometimes you stumble and make a mistake. Sometimes a different family will have different rules, but you kind of learn how to pick up on the rules of a social situation. And without someone saying, okay, I'm inviting you to my house and here are the rules. So that doesn't usually happen. You just kind of figure out how to pay attention to what matters to this family, cultural context, whatever is influencing the social rules, and you figure it out. And you also come with a bunch of knowledge about the social rules because you've had a ton of life experiences to help you with that. So this is a skill that children are learning in this kind of play, is how to figure out social context rules without anyone telling them the rules. So they're making them up together and they're pushing against them. So one of the things my mom remembers about my oldest daughter a lot is that she used to direct play so much. And my mom would get frustrated and need a break because my daughter would be saying, say this. Now I'll say this. Now you say this. Now I'll say this. And it was just so over scripted from her perspective. But what she wanted to do was basically use my mom as a prop to do her own pretend play with dolls. And so she was in control, which is another thing that's really good about pretend play, is that kids are calling the shots. In most of life, they are not. They don't have a lot of control. And it's important for them to have these places where they can lead, their ideas can flourish, and it's fairly open-ended. We don't know. This restaurant could also sell pizza, could also be in space, could also have superheroes. Maybe, whatever. It could go anywhere. We don't know. Yeah. And all of that's okay within the realm of pretend play. And the kids get to decide and the kids get to work it out, which is really valuable experience. You can also think of it as a place. I know you were talking about the social skills and this emotional side where you can kind of understand each other. You can build this theory of mind, or hear from each other's perspective, build some empathy, take each other's, if you and I were, let's say we're 4 years old and we're pretending something and you said something or did something, it helps me understand your point of view or your perspective. And again, it's not explicit lessons. It's real life, real time kind of fantasy play that's teaching me that lesson as a child.
So so children, it's an opportunity for them to start to pretend this character might be feeling this way, but this other character is feeling a different way. And for us as adults, that's like obvious, right? Like every book you read, every movie you watch, you know that that's happening. But for young kids, this is a pretty brain bursting idea that everyone is having a different feeling about the same situation. So it's just really great for that kind of practice. And I also want to go back to something else you touched on earlier, which is this idea of emotions and play and how children can use imaginary play to work something out that they're either curious about or worried about. And like, it doesn't have to be a big, scary, huge life crisis. It could be something regular. Like I remember when my daughter was about 3 or 4 years old, we had to go for flu shots. And she was expressing just really not a fan of this idea. So I kind of casually put like a little doctor's kit in her play area in our house. And that's a very specific type of prop, and then I kind of just let her find it on her own. And then I casually said, should we get do you think maybe your stuffed kitty cat needs a flu shot too? And she lit up and she got excited about that. So that one it was more mom led than child led, but I pounced on this opportunity to use pretend play. I knew she was all excited about pretend play in general. And then she kind of went with it. Then she was the doctor. Then she was the nurse. Then she was the child. And I just let her go with it at that point. She wanted to be in charge of it. I just kind of I gave her the opportunity to work something out.
Yep.
And then she took the kitty cat to the flu shot with her. And she asked the nurse to give the kitty, and it was a whole thing. So she extended the pretend play into the doctor's office that day.
Yeah,
awesome.
I love that. And it's such a smart strategy for families and parents to help a child work something out that is going to happen in real life, that they don't have a lot of control over, that they're scared of, that they don't fully understand, and they can get some control. They can start to understand it, and they can bring that pretend play into it. I mean, anyone who's listening to this that works in the medical field has probably given so many stuffed animals and baby dolls pretend shots and medicine, and it's so good. It is so good for children. I had that. My daughter, the same one, had a little bit of a medical issue when she was younger, and she had a bunch of tests and things that were a little bit stressful for all of us. So it was hard for me too, but helping her get through it, we read a lot of books, we played a lot of games about it, and it prepared her too, because it's, one of the things that children that helps them with their pretend play and why it somewhat goes away is because they don't have that many experiences to tell them what is fact or fiction, what's possible and what's not possible. And life experiences, along with cognitive sophistication, are what help people start to understand what's fantasy versus reality. But they don't know. Kind of everything's on the table when they're really little. And they're starting to figure it out, but they don't know where this is going to go. They haven't done this before. So giving them some reality. This is what is going to happen. And that's what a book can do. And then the play can do. And you as the adult can understand what they're worried about, so you can address some of their challenges in that. I love that so much. I hope that's one of the takeaways people get out of this, is how to use pretend play to help through tricky, stressful situations, moving, doing a sleepover, any kind of medical situation, dental, anything children are worried about. It's going to school. Pretend school. Yes. Kids love to play school.
Oh, they love it, because then they get to be the teacher and they get to be the parent picking the kid up. They get to be all the roles that they don't get to be.
Right. And sometimes they're pretty tough. My youngest daughter, oh my gosh, it was hard to go to her school. She was she was tough, but she was getting something out. She was getting something out. We all had to go along.
Yeah. And I was chuckling to myself listening to you talk, Rachel, because you just jogged a memory that my youngest went through a couple months where every time we played, we had to play birthday party. And looking back on it, I realized it's because he was getting these invitations to birthday parties in, I guess it was pre-K. And there was something he was really trying to work out about that. Like, what's the order of events? You go in, you play, you sit and have the pizza, then you have the cake, then you get a goodie bag. I mean, the number of times I played birthday party, I was so tired of it, but this child was working something out. He needed to know what was going to happen, what was the order of events, what's the scenario. Yeah. We had a lot of bags around of fake goodie bags. I mean, it was just a whole scene around here.
It is. I get such a kick out of entering children's pretend play when I'm visiting centers, because I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know these children, so I don't know the rules, and I don't know their typical behavior or where they are developmentally, except for just to understand, I'm in a 5-year-old classroom. And I often will ask questions that they think are crazy, and sometimes they'll go with me, and sometimes they're like, I don't know who this woman is, but I'm asking for different things on the rest. I'm often like engaging in some sort of a restaurant scenario. So I'm seeing what I can order, how long things are going to take. And then they bring me stuff, and they get such a kick out of adults playing along with them. So if I pretend to eat everything and I'm so full, or I ask questions as if they're an adult, I treat them as if this play is real. And I engage in it as if I absolutely just showed up at a restaurant. And so let me see what's on the menu. And yes, I'm very hungry. And they love that because, again, they are in control. And sometimes I don't try to direct it, but I ask a question that pushes up against where they were going. And they're very quick to shut me down. And that's totally fine. I get a huge kick out of that, but I also learn a little bit about what's going on. So it is such a beautiful time to understand what your children are thinking about, what they care about, what they're working out, what they're working through. We wanted to talk a bit about cognitive development too in pretend play. So certainly we can all tell they're social emotional. We've been talking about that. There's a lot of creativity in pretend play. I think that maybe goes without saying, is just all the different avenues kids are trying to explore through that. But there is some good intellectual cognitive development happening here as well. Children have to make these quicker decisions. There's a lot of choice making. There's a lot of, we talked about that theory of mind. There's a lot of like understanding other perspectives. There's some good critical thinking, and being creative and flexible and critical thinking. Those are all very important 21st century skills. Used to be called soft skills, now often referred to as durable skills because they hang on with you through life. So those are really important. Stephanie Carlson, Dr. Stephanie Carlson at the University of Minnesota did some fun research that was called the Batman effect. And it was about when kids are pretending to be a character they admire, they kind of level up their skill set. So she did some experiments about kids deciding who they wanted to be. A lot of them chose Batman, and they were able to do things at a higher cognitive level than their developmental level because they were taking on this role of this character. So I'm wildly simplifying her research, but it is really interesting to think that not only are they able to develop their own cognitive skills and practice them, they're also able to take on different personas and skills through their pretend play if they're perceiving that character they're playing has higher level skills. And the reverse is true. Of course, we've seen lots of 5-year-olds pretend they're a baby and really enjoy to do that, or a puppy or whatever. We've probably all had a 4-year-old around the house as a puppy for a while. But then they can also do the opposite. And I think that's pretty fascinating to see that kids are able to do that. They're not making a conscious decision to do that. They're just able to do that.
There's so much to unpack just with, I know Dr. Carlson talks a lot about executive function skills. That's what her research focuses on. The number of executive function skills that your child is mastering by even like 30 minutes of pretend play. They're working on the cognitive flexibility. Like you said, oh, that character said this in the pretend play, so now I have to change what I'm going to say next. They're working on impulse control, right? If they want the play to keep going, they're going to have to not hit their brother with the baby doll, right? That's an impulse control. The working memory. I just think about how my brothers and I would go back down to the basement and pick up with playing zoo after lunch. And we'd have to be like, whoa, wait, what was happening? Who was what? Like just I can think about the neurons just exploding in everyone's brain.
Firing away. Yeah.
There's so much good cognitive stuff happening during all this pretend play. So much.
So, I mean, I feel like people are going to get off of this podcast and just go rush right into pretend play with their kids. We want to give you a couple ideas about how to do that. I did want to just mention one thing before we do that, is that I often get a lot of questions about when kids start to know like real real life, real reality? Is it okay to take them down the road of like, there's a tooth fairy or some of those fantasy things? Is it harmful to perpetuate some of those things? And when can they tell the difference? And so I think this is a choice you get to make as a parent. There isn't damage done to children by giving them this fantasy, magical thing in we'll just use the tooth fairy as an example. But not all parents want to do that. And some parents want to do it for a while, and it's okay. Kids, again, I said this already, but one of the ways that we as adults are less interested in value pretend play is we have so much life experience now telling us what's real, what can happen, what can't happen. Obviously the cognitive skills to be able to differentiate that as well. Kids are still trying to figure that out. So they see something and they're like, which box does it go in? Is it real? And the more experiences they have, the more able they are to sort that out. So they can kind of say, well, I've never seen a dragon before. I've never seen anything that looks like a dragon. Never seen any animals that are breathing fire. I've never sat on a beach with an animal. I think I'm thinking, or a dragon. I'm thinking of Pete's Dragon, which is a really old movie. So I'm dating myself too. But then they start to think that maybe that's not real. That's not possible because I have no evidence of that. But they're building that as they go. So anyway, I say all this to because this is a common question: is does it hurt my child for me to perpetuate this fantasy? But pay attention when they're ready to be done with it. They might be asking some questions. They might have other friends that have something else going on at their home that allows them to think a little critically about it. And where you might want to make some decisions is when you're getting to a point of really like doubling down on this, when they're clearly showing you signs they're ready to understand it differently. They're absolutely going to trust the adults they love the most. And your trust isn't damaged because you told them about a tooth fairy, but you're more likely to get them to go along with it as their most trusted person in their lives. So it's a pretty wishy-washy answer because it is really a choice. You're not damaging your child, but pay attention to them and the questions that they're asking. And if you're all in on the magic of something like that and want that to be a part of your parenting, it is an okay thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree that they will start showing you signs when they're ready to be all done with that particular type of imagination.
Right. Okay. I mean, I do still tell my kids that they can choose whether or not to believe, but there might be something in it for them if they go along with me. And they're doing it now to humor me.
That's so cute. Because I know how old your children are. That's very adult.
I know they're in their 20s, but we got to keep the magic going. And or I have to find some other children to do it with.
That's right. That's what happens. You move on to other children.
Other people's children,
Okay, a few quick tips. If you are, as Rachel said, you're just ready to, turn off this podcast and go do some pretend play with your kids. Here are some things we can recommend. These are things we would do in a Bright Horizons classroom that also work super well at home. Take stock of your play area in your home. We could do a whole other podcast just on how to set up a really great play area. Maybe we will. But do you have objects in your play area that can be lots of things? Let me rephrase that. There are classic dramatic play props, things like a shopping cart or toy money, very popular in the restaurant scenario. Baby dolls. A baby doll is probably going to just be a baby doll, right? A shopping cart is probably just going to be a shopping cart, though it could be something else as well. Do you have other things as well, such as the wooden blocks? The wooden blocks could be a road for cars. The wooden blocks could be a tower that's a fire station. The wooden blocks could be the cell phone, right? Also things like cardboard boxes, just like we call those like open-ended materials. Right. Leave those out. Just like let your child have access to them and see what happens, because they might get really into something that you didn't even think of.
Yeah, I think that those representational toys are so valuable, and especially if you're catching on to something your child is doing. So if they're playing zoo or whatever, if they're interested in animals, let's say, you can give them stuffed animals, figurines. Yeah. They can even make some animals, which is really cool, to be able to let them do out of whatever they want, cardboard or fabrics, whatever materials you have. But you then also have those symbolic things. I mean, there is a reason children love the cardboard box, the pots and pans, the wooden spoons, the just those materials that you're like, I don't know what it is. It could be anything. They love them. And then they can be for any kind of play that your children are engaged in. So that's another thing we would say is you have the props, go with them. This does not have to be expensive. You can find things in many different places. You can ask them, what do they need from the house that they could use? You don't have to even go shopping for this. But you can also find many inexpensive things. I often find loose parts are these kind of open-ended materials in places that people are often giving them away. You just want, of course, always paying attention to safety. And then play with them. They love it when they can be in charge of the adult and they get to be in control and they're giving you the script. You have to suspend all your disbelief. Anything can happen in here. Go with what they're doing, asking them open-ended questions, figuring out what they're thinking, introducing ideas to them. I'm thinking, I wonder, or tell me about. Those are really good questions to get them thinking. They love when you go along with them.
Yes. That's really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but just make, letting them lead the play so that they can be like the boss during the play is what a power trip for a 3-year-old, first of all, but also just like it just, and then you get to see that's when the observation happens on your part. Be a detective. What's this kid working on right now?
Yeah.
What are they, you can kind of just sit there and kind of observe, like, what are they're working on something, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, negotiation tactics. You've got a future attorney on your hands who's like, this is exactly, thinking about your daughter who was like, you're going to say this and I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
This is how it's going to go. It's so valuable for a young child.
It's so valuable. Yeah. Yeah. And have fun and be silly. It's actually really valuable for you as an adult. This is a good wellness experience for you to just let it go. Let all the rules of reality go and see what happens. You don't know what might be happening in the next 20 minutes of play or whatever it might be. And so just kind of going with it and enjoying it, being silly, being characters. Kids, again, they have this so much control, and then they get to see you in a different light, someone that they trust and know, but they also see as responsible and doing a lot of tasks and getting things done. You're going to be in a different perspective. So it does. I mean, the cardboard box is such a beautiful thing. All the different sizes of cardboard boxes too. I remember we got a couch that came in pieces one time when my kids were little. Yeah. And it was so huge. And instead of setting up the couch, we put that in the garage and we let that giant cardboard box be the main event in the living room for a while. And it was elaborate what was happening. But I went to a lot of sleepovers. I had a campfire under there. We poked holes for the night sky. I mean, so many interesting things happen in there. Yeah. And I don't know that I would have been even able to think of some of those things because I have too many constructs in my mind. So they're freer in where they're going to go. So just have fun, be silly. It's good for you. It's great for them. And I think the last thing, and we sort of talked about this at the beginning, but make time for this. Make time, let it happen, and let it extend. So your example was beautiful in terms of just letting that keep going. If you think about a child, if they're always asked to clean up everything that they're doing, then they can't have really elaborate play schemas or this pretend fantasy play or creative play because they have to start over every time. So they should be able to come back to what they started. So, we so many adults work on their computer, but I just think of my examples. I'm a writer. If I didn't finish my writing in the middle of what I was in my work day and I had to start over the next day because I didn't finish it, I don't know if I'd be a writer. That would be very difficult to be able to sustain that. I certainly wouldn't be as good because I'd be rushing. I wouldn't have the time to think through ideas when I'm on a walk and come back with something new. It's the exact same thing for children in play. And it really builds their cognitive muscles as well as their creativity to be able to come back to it.
It's a sign of respect for the work of your child too. I really think it builds, like you said, a lot of respect and trust It doesn't mean that if they've taken over your entire central living room of your house that you have to leave it exactly that way. Maybe there's a little bit of negotiation that can happen, but just getting down on your child's level and saying, are you all done with this, or do you want to keep playing with this later? And if they say, I'm not done, I need to keep playing with this, and you can see it on their face, they're really into this, maybe we can pack up some of it, or like take a picture with your cell phone. This is what it was. This is exactly what it looked like. We're going to move it all over here, and then I'm going to help you later this afternoon after nap time. I'm going to help you set it up this way. We've got a photo here so we can see where you left off, right? So, doesn't mean you have to break your neck jumping over toys for 3 weeks, but there's ways that you can work around it a little bit. Yeah,
I love that photo example, and in just helping that you're helping them. You're their assistant. They have a goal. You have some construct that or rule or guideline, or you need for some reason that living room. And we did absolutely need the living room back at some point. And so how do we get there without disrupting that play? So I hope that you've all enjoyed this episode. It is about one of the most fun parts of childhood. And I challenge all of you to think about how you might promote, prompt, or engage in some play. If you have some cardboard boxes coming your way, make sure that some of them don't go in recycling, and you keep some of them for that play. Don't worry about the pots and pans or the bowls or the toys getting used for all sorts of different things. See that as such a beautiful opportunity to develop your child's social, emotional, and cognitive skills at this really fun time of childhood.
Get parenting advice from Rachel and Claire. You can leave them a voicemail by calling 617-673-8881, and your question may be answered in a future episode of Teach, Play, Love. You can also send them an email at teach.playlove@brighthorizons.com. For more expert guidance on early childhood development, check out our family resources at brighthorizons.com.
Thanks for listening.
Subscribe to us. Find more episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
See you next time on Teach, Play, Love.
And discover parenting as the joy it was meant to be.